maybe there will be a hybrid of human and machine that will make us, in a way, superhuman. But if you're not using that, you're like such a disadvantage compared to others that, rely on their own knowledge. I see it as a tool right now, but it's not a tool. I mean, it's going to be bigger than that. We will be the tools if we don't understand that.
Welcome to AI and Healthcare Podcast. My name is Dr. Sanjay Juneja. I'm a hematologist medical oncologist, also known as the Onc on social and news media, joined by my co-host, Dr. Douglas Flora, the man of many things. And today, we have a case study for you, and it's not the case study in the way that you think about it. I was actually in New York City speaking at Carnegie Hall. I believe, actually, Doug, I think you had facilitated this talk for me. And I met a gentleman who I already knew because he's published hundreds of papers. He's a breast cancer specialist. But that is not why he's on this podcast today. He's on this podcast because he took his brilliance, which he calls a hobby, and said, you know what? I'm not ready to retire and stop this whole thought leadership thing. And I think there are a lot of people that need to know and understand both the management of breast cancer from an oncology standpoint, but even patients, because there's a ton of misinformation out there. And I have a lot of, white and gray keratin of wisdom that I want to share for people as they go on these journeys and all these things that come up to date. And what he did was actually figure it all out. He said, I need to figure out this Claude Code stuff and these tech stacks and be able to optimize the placement of things and SEO and GEO. And so we're going to walk through how he went from literally none of it to doing it extremely well. And I would honestly argue we say better than I've been able to ascertain. So with all that said, Francisco, we're super excited to have you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sanjay and Doug. It's a pleasure. It was really nice seeing you in New York, and I learned a lot from you how to apply AI to patient care, basically, which is one of the biggest challenges. And I appreciate you having me.
Sanjay, this is a fun one for us, and I love what he's done. And if you look at Francisco's recaps from ASCO or San Antonio, they don't read like promotional posts. They read like executive briefings for real working oncologists. And I love that because I know how hard it is to strike that balance. You do that while running a big division at Northwell and, 200 plus papers. And so I credit you on that. One of the things I want to get into as we talk about this, because I think, Sanjay, you and I both live on social media probably more than we ever dreamed when we trained. And I know your why. I know my why, and we'll get to those things. But Francisco, how did you find yourself here? He's talking about our gray and white keratin. He always makes fun of our age on this podcast. I want to point out for the audience that can't see us, I'm getting hip enough. I bought a blue light this week. I bought some gold lights. I am now officially podcasting with the Onc. And so I want to keep up with this. Francisco, I'm sure you feel the same way. We feel the pressure of keeping up with the Onc. But can you share with us how you found yourself in this strange situation where not just an academic chair, you're not just a very respected voice in the literature, but you found a voice out here in this ether land that we live in social media?
Yeah, thank you. It was about 2.5 years ago that, when ChatGPT came up with all these custom GPTs and so on at the end of 2023, I believe, I became fascinated by this. I used to listen to YouTube tutorials and things going to work, and became interested in that and how people were developing ways to automate the things with Make.com or say Zapier, things like that, and developing custom GPTs. So I started playing with that, and I found it really, the technology was fascinating to me. I've never been big in social media. I had a Twitter account years ago, been involved in LinkedIn, but not that involved. But somehow I was attracted to YouTube because it was something I used to listen to all the time in the mornings, and and I also felt there was a gap in medical education. Most of the talks we hear are from doctors talking to doctors. Of course, there is a big industry behind it, and they all want to share their information. But I thought there was a gap in education for patients. There are some doctors also talking to patients, but in a more entertaining type of thing. So I was trying to to become kind of share what I know in a way that is understandable to patients, but keeping it rigorous and scientific. With all this misinformation going on in the internet, I felt it was important to have a voice as an expert, and be one of the trusted doctors, as in this media to have a voice, basically. But my why, my reason to do this, my passion, my motivation was to educate patients, not so much doctors, because that's very well covered, and that's why I wanted to do this.
And, it's very timely because just today, on the day of this recording, on July 22nd, the New York Times had this big kind of article that said ChatGPT gave the wrong advice to a patient. It was a pastor, and, led to a pulmonary embolism in the middle of a sermon. Again, this is an article on New York Times, as well as just yesterday about a breach when it came to healthcare data. So fortunate or unfortunate, I think it's going to be quite some time before there is this trust for, technologies and AI to fulfill in any capacity the stuff that you really seek, the wisdom of a physician and a trained, licensed, board certified physician from. With all of that said, they will not be there to learn from if you're not accessible, because the way you access this stuff is just not the way that it used to be. And anyone listening to this probably already knows that. It's, yes, we get the journals and the magazines and stuff, and in our mailbox, and it packs it up, etc. But you realize that there's a consumption happening here when it comes to video making. And I'll tell you, I have not gone to a single hospital and spoken once where somebody didn't come after and said, I would really like to get into this, but I just don't know how, or I don't know, where to start. I can film myself, but what next? So what did you do? You knew getting in front of a camera, was a thing. You knew that. I think quickly you learned, you were telling me, that there's a script more involved than you would have thought, because you think you just show up like you would do in a clinic. And then you started telling me about how you started making that happen, how you generated the scripts from large language models, how you started to, I believe, automate, or at least have some kind of workflow on the topics that were being discussed and pulling them into scripts. How did that journey begin? And then and tell us about that cool system you made.
Yeah, so my first videos were really bad. I filmed them in my office and with my laptop and an iPhone and so on, and they were very bad quality. I was very happy about it, but then after a couple of months, a friend of mine who had a podcast told me, you may have a future, but this is not good. So he actually was sent me one of his graduate students who was helping him, and that's when I started. She came with a camera to my house. We filmed the first video I did actually in January of 2024. I just sat there and started talking about a topic that I knew very well, which is HER2-positive breast cancer. I published hundreds of papers on that. So, and I was involved from the beginning. So just telling the story, and today that's one of my most successful videos. I didn't have to script it or anything. I was just talking in my home, and then she edited a little bit. And with that student, I learned, I learned very fast. So I think you have to see it like in the clinic. You see something, then you can do it. I learned the importance of having, a decent camera, sound, and then I got into lights and things like that later on. But just those 4 or 5 videos initially that I did with her, I learned the basics. Then I bought a camera and a couple of nice mics, like high quality sound. I think is very important for YouTube, a nice camera. Then I got some lights. So over the last 2 years, I've been improving my equipment in terms of filming. And then I, using remote controls and so on, and ChatGPT or things like that, I could optimize my lighting and things like that. Just working on my own. I basically working everything I do on my own by myself. So I do those things remotely, which are relatively easy to do.
But even
And
then, I have to interrupt and share. People don't know, like, you would take pictures or you would take a video, put it into these LLMs and say, what do I do? Like, what am I doing wrong? And it would give you very directed guidance People don't know you can even take a picture of your equipment and where the stuff is, and it can say, look, remove this light here. And you made it sound so like, well, of course you could do that. People don't realize like it is the best aid to even help the actual like production setting.
It's unbelievable. Just the production, now I have a couple of lights and tells me, move this up, more of this, more of that. And then the lighting looks pretty good. You want more cinematic things, it's kind of very interesting. I love the photography aspect of this. And then in terms of the process developing the content, I did a few, just not scripted. But then I realized I thought it was a good idea to script things because you want to be accurate and so on. So I decided to script. So I use LLM models like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude. Claude is very good for writing and so on. But ChatGPT, deep research, for example, gives you very good information. And then I usually basically filter through 2 or 3 of them. It's like getting second opinions. And then I also developed my own custom GPT with guidelines to double check myself. I think I know what I'm saying, and I know I'm an expert in breast cancer. But I also had one in my workflow. I have a custom GPT, basically double checking, make sure everything is within guidelines and so on. And then I played with one of these automation systems called Make.com. Other people use Zapier and so on, where you can actually put like a Legos type of things, modules one after the other, and you can just click a button and then it does whatever you want, scripts this and that, sends you emails, all kinds of things. And that's been helpful. I don't use it that much right now. I have had a completely different workflow right now, but that was helpful. So learning a little bit of that was at the beginning, but then so I basically write the scripts and then I talk to the camera, and that's pretty much it. Then the editing part is so if you're comfortable talking to a camera, I think, or which is a little bit weird at the beginning, I think that's a big step. If you can do that. And then editing is what takes me the most time. So editing is really, I still do it myself. And now I'm learning a better way, actually. I can tell you about what I'm doing right now, which is amazing. But for the longest time, I spent a lot of time editing. And it would be the first thing I said I would do if I wanted to outsource things. But right now, I'm still very possessive about my ways. And they say the first thing you should outsource is the editing, but I still doing it. And this month, I've spent again a lot of time learning a new way, which I think is good. It doesn't matter how old you are. I mean, I started on when I was basically 60 years old, and also thinking, well, this may be a way to do something when I retire, and I'm loving it. But every day there's new things coming out. So the last couple of weeks or so, I've been playing with this new codecs from a platform from OpenAI using hyperframes. It really makes editing so much easier, and you can basically automate everything. You clean up a little bit the first pass, and then it creates graphics for you. I have another program to create B-roll, which is like movies that you can put in the background and so on, which I pay a subscription to get royalty-free material. But I'm learning it's taking me a little bit, I basically slow down my process because learning the new skills, to do this with the hope that it will make it faster later on. But so the technology, once you know how to use these things, it makes things much easier, but it just takes time to learn, Claude, codecs, hyperframes, things like that. The skills have 20 skills so everything you do, you make it a skill. You don't have to do it again. And then even when you upload, you can actually show the computer what you're doing, and it will do the next thing for you the next time. So it's really fascinating. I just find the technology so fascinating that
Well, let's unpack this. Doug, you can help us with this because you nailed it. Like that labor at the beginning is definitely slower. Like that's what I was told that people felt about like with scribes at first and stuff, and then it's faster in the clinic. It's the same thing. And I went through I used Make as well, rather than Zapier. And for those listening, that don't know it, is automation software. So you basically have these connectors, you pull what's called the API from whatever app or URL, et cetera, that you're using. And then you can, no code, just kind of connect these things and say, this is how I want everything to dance and to move and to go. Like, look at this, take this, et cetera. Now, I think people are going away from it because, you can really just literally vibe type that into Claude Cowork or into ChatGPT released something called Work recently, much like Cowork, where you can actually just say this. So I have these AI articles that populate in my drafts every day on Gmail, and it knows very well and very specified exactly the kind of categories I'm looking into. But let's walk through, if you want, or Doug, you can set the tone. People talk about projects, they talk about markdown files, and they talk about memory. Show us at first what that means to you, Doug, when you're explaining to somebody, and how you can actually start the process to have something remember your workflow in the future.
Yeah, I think this is where we can help the crowd. So number one, Sanjay and I, for our brief why, Francisco, we both fell into this accidentally as practicing clinicians during COVID. And Sanjay, you don't even know, I don't know, but probably I did none of this. I was a breast cancer oncologist. I knew your work very well, Francisco, for many years. I started writing to combat the disinformation about the flatten the curve and, the way that air spreads from an air conditioner in a restaurant, because I had like 3,500 patients on my Facebook. And I felt like there were no credible people offering any logical scientific explanations for what we were facing. And a few friends and I here at my hospital system at St. Elizabeth just started doing it to protect our community. And so that's how this all started. And then I wrote a couple pieces for Kevin MD that I really enjoyed. It cleared my head and kind of made sense of the chaos. One about telehealth, and one was about like a Carrying in Bites and Pieces or something, how telehealth was taking us back into patients' homes. And I really found that I enjoyed finding my voice there. Fast forward now 4 or 5 years, and Francisco, I did not go the X route because I work for a healthcare system that strongly discouraged it because of all the trolls on there. So I did most of my building of my voice on LinkedIn, which I agree with everyone listening is ultra cringy, and I hate it too. But Sanjay and I can get millions of messages to people in a manner that they can digest and that might help their greater good. And that's our why. We both want to teach, and we both want to reduce suffering at scale. And through this education platform, I can touch more than the 20 patients I can see in clinic. And so I really credit you for doing that. To go to Sanjay's real question, the how, I wanted our audience to figure out, this isn't rocket science, guys. You're brilliant clinicians and providers on here. If I can figure it out, anybody can, because I'm not tech savvy. But what we're referring to is in the large language models, whether you're Gemini, whether you're Claude, most of us are Claude these days, or GPT, there are functions in the left margin usually called projects or gems, or under Notebook LM for Gemini, it's just now Gemini Notebook. And when I start anything, and I'm sure you guys are the same, I open a new project and I spend probably 10 minutes just loading it with rules. And I'll drop in articles of a great spell checker, Grammarly type thing, how to write better prose. And I'll load those things there. And then I will say, I hate AI speak. So if you're going to help me write, I do not want Tapestry, Beacon, Delve, all of the AI slop that is generated, but help me organize my thoughts. And then to speak to Francisco's point, anything you're doing in that, it will remember the rules forever inside that project and no other rules. And then what we all do now, the people who are living in these tools like Claude Cowork, is when you do something, you can either screen record and say, save this as a markdown file or as a .md, or you just type it. Or I speak it into my phone. Francisco, I don't know if you've moved away from the keyboard yet, but the last 6 months, I'm almost exclusively on Whisper or in my Plod, because I find that when I type, I filter my thoughts and I lose some nuance because I can't type very well. I can speak 160 words a minute. I can type like 38. And so that has been very liberating for me. And then you say, save this as a markdown or save this as a skill. And then you never have to train your model again. Everything you ever do for the rest of your time in that project will follow those rules. And boy, that's Talk about a force multiplier, right? Maybe speak to your own method, your own madness, Francisco, how you do this and how you enter things and how you tell the computer to learn as you go.
Yeah, I just learned how to do this, recording the skill that you mentioned, where you just I'm using now more OpenAI work and codecs for different reasons, but I think it's really very efficient, similar to Claude, I would say, but it's very fast and cheaper, and you can get much more done. But I don't need too many things, but there's you don't reach your limits as much with this. But yeah, I create a project, and I learned actually the last few days how to do this. For example, yesterday I uploaded a video on YouTube, and I basically recorded the process. So next time I'll just say upload, and they will do it for me. All the steps, bringing up the YouTube page that you give permission to access. You give codecs permission to access your computer, and which I was scared about that initially, but it's okay. And you watch what the computer is doing, and it's basically the same thing. And then at the end, it's going to be saved as unlisted or private. You don't want it to go public with some mistakes, and so I still have the last say to say, now we're going to do it, but and then just post it. Then this, so that's, I do the same thing you do, trying to write in a way that is more human. Then also when you deliver, just use your words a little bit, but the most difficult thing for me was actually speak in a way that can be understood by a 10-year-old or 12-year-old. And that was the biggest challenge to me, because initially some people said, sounds great, but I thought it was simple and they didn't understand. And now my patients say, oh yeah, they love it. And it's because I learned how to do this. Took me, I'm still probably not good enough, but it's not like you're speaking down to anyone, but this is what people actually like. If you talk to me about something other than medicine, in that sense, I would appreciate it if you talk to me about physics in a way that I understand. So I think that was one of the pearls, the things that I had to learn, is not to dumb it down, explain it in a way. I use a lot of graphics that I make, and now I'm learning how to do them with hyperframes from Hygiene, which is amazing, and it's open source, it's free, and it's connected to Codex or Claude. So easy to do that. It makes things more visual, more, and that's when I gave talks in the past to physicians and schools and so on. I used to remember PowerPoint. I used to do that. And then with making my own graphs, it would take you a month to make a presentation. And now this is much faster. So that's the process is like that. And the other thing that took me a while also to deal with, I don't know if you're if there's something of interest for your audience, but as you get into YouTube, you get exposed to the whole world, right? And you have to have a little bit of a thick skin, because some people make comments that are not appropriate, or not that I want people to say how wonderful I am, but I don't like when people provide misinformation about treatments that are not proven to cure cancer, or be insulting about me, which I do this for free. Okay, so I don't need to be insulted for anything, or criticizing the industry in an abstract way. So one thing I had to deal with, because some of my videos have like 150,000 views, or like, wow, this is a lot of people. At most I spoke at ASCO to a few thousand, but this is huge, the impact you can have. And anyway, so the comments aspects of it, I had to develop another automated system to deal with that, because you cannot go into 50, 60, 80 videos and know what's going on. So that actually is the main use I have now for Make, that I developed a system to go into my YouTube channel, search for comments, and then I have a very complicated distribution depending on what kind, how to respond. I use API, LLM type of modules like ChatGPT to help me address the comment and then classify it high risk, low risk, and so on. And then I connect it to Telegram and I get it on my phone. So on my phone, I can say post, revise, or delete. And it goes back to make through a webhook and it's done. So
I
that
love that.
would be also a month to learn. So the point is that there's so much in YouTube in terms of tutorials and technology that if you learn what you need, and then there is a way to do it by yourself. And that's one of the biggest workflows that I'm very proud of, to do it in an automated way and also through my iPhone, which is what lives with me. So that's another thing I learned recently.
Hey, Sanjay, for our audience that is never going to get in front of a camera and YouTube, I want to point out, this isn't just about what we're talking about here. This is about finding your voice as a leader in oncology. And as you've said, you've now touched millions of people when you might have only been able to touch 18 in your clinic, or 22, or 3,000 in ASCO in a big showing. And so your knowledge is being disseminated. And that feels really, really good, especially when you get feedback from the other kind of people that are saying, this was so meaningful to me. I didn't know I got screened because you told me it was important that I get screened, and they found a stage 1 cancer. That's what makes all this worth it. For the clinicians and for the other people in the audience that don't have any intentions of being in front of a camera or editing anything on Descript or whatever, did you catch his PowerPoint comment? If you're on Claude, if you're on Gamma AI, if you're on GPT or Gemini now, your entire deck can be generated. And I did 2 or 3 last night, Francisco. Your entire deck can be generated from a 2-paragraph prompt that you talked into your phone. And they're beautiful, and they've got incredible graphics, and they've got citations at the bottom. And if you are careful and you build a mega prompt the first time that's 2.5 pages long, then it also triple checks every citation. And it makes sure that it doesn't do the things that we don't like doing, like making things up or hallucinating. And you build the rules around that, and then you save that as a skill. And then I have now on Claude Cowork, I wish we could share a screen. Maybe I'll put that in the comments for all the trolls to make fun of when we put this up on YouTube, Sanjay. But the rules, I want it to be a McKinsey quality deck. I want it to have 3 main points per slide. I want some sort of image, table, figure to break up the copy and break up the words. I want the big idea to be offset. And they're just rules for how to do a good deck. And man, it cooks for like 1.5 minutes or 2 minutes. And you get 40 slides that are better than anything that I've ever made before or you've made before. And it's so gratifying. It almost feels like magic. So those of us that are out there in the clinics and you've been asked to give a presentation, if you do nothing else after this podcast, realize that you no longer have to make your own PowerPoints. I guess the kids now call them decks, right, Sanjay? We can't even call them PowerPoints.
I believe, yeah, presentation, who knows?
Yeah, a medical presentation or any type of presentation is very helpful to use these programs. I think you've spent a lot of time building those prompts and rules and so on, which I personally haven't done that. And you have to be a little bit careful if you're going to do that to use the right systems, because a month ago I tried to make a quick presentation on ChatGPT and the graphs actually didn't make, I wasn't sure they were correct. So I went to source and it actually made them up. So it was, so I decided to use the design that these type of programs give you and make the slides, the presentation very good. But then I went and copy and pasted the graphs from the New England Journal and so on, because I wasn't sure if they was reproducing the right graphs from the right paper, because they're so similar in terms of, so that's the only thing that is the quality.
Well said. Francisco, I may share my prompt in our comments on YouTube when we post this for the listeners. Remind me, I'll try and do that and just show, and you don't have to love this, but I've done the same thing for answering all my emails, right? I've done the same thing for helping me figure out what I want to write about each week on Substack to make me an outline. And I love to have historical context in the things that I write. So I use these tools like Perplexity to say, hey, show me somebody who tried something new or who discovered something new and everybody made fun of them back in the day. And you'll find out the first person with the thermometer or the stethoscope or hand washing. And that becomes kind of the context that I use to try and show physicians we've been wrong about technologies before. And the measuring temperatures is so table stakes for us now. But back then, a fever was a disease, not a symptom. And so this guy had to take 1 million temperatures, publish the data, and I wrote about this on my Substack and shared it on LinkedIn. But he was fighting against the hand. Like, how do you, as a physician, like the learned hand, I could tell so much more about a patient by putting my hand against it versus this 1-foot-long mercury thermometer. And I think we're in the same era right now where you were an early adopter, Sanjay's an early adopter, I might be. But 2 years from now, every doctor you know is going to be using these tools for good. And we're just trying to accelerate the responsible uptake. So when we get 3 of us on here that are using these, guys, I'm using it to teach my patients. I'll say, listen, this woman is an artist. She is from small town Kentucky. She's terribly frightened. How do I teach her about HER2 new positivity in a breast cancer using imagery and terminology that would resonate with this young artist? And then it comes up with this parable about, and you're painting a picture, and in the picture you have this and you have this, and then I love it, and it makes me a better teacher in the room on my whiteboard when I'm face to face with a patient. And when you talk about take it down to like the 10-year-old level, maybe it is a 10-year-old and you're a pediatrician and you say, this kid loves basketball or this kid does nothing but swimming. Let me teach them about the importance of nutrition using basketball analogies.
Mhm.
Right. And I just love that application. I'm so glad you brought that up for the audience because this isn't just about taping yourself and building a personal brand online.
These LLMs are so good about this, and they learn from you also. The more you do it, and you do it, and you do it, and it learns how you like to explain things and so on. But those analogies, those parables, are so powerful. Like on my recent videos, I was talking about why give chemotherapy when there's nothing there, like either in the neoadjuvant setting or in the adjuvant setting, and we don't know, and the concept of microscopic metastases, right? That when you have a tumor is removed, but the cancers may have escaped right before the tumor is removed, since it takes so long to get there. So I came up with this analogy of the tumor being a factory. The workers had left, and then you close the factory, nothing happens. And it's so visual that people understand, you can throw a nuclear bomb in the factory, the workers are gone. And this, I love this type of things, and these LLMs, these language models, can actually help you develop those explanations. And don't talk about infographics and things like that, which are amazing, what you can get from even ChatGPT is one of the best, I think, in terms of imaging and infographics.
For sure.
Give a brief prompt and you get all these things, which I use in my videos, but you can use in your patients to talk about very complex disease. And nowadays, most institutions we're just building a new building that will have all these panels and computers, panels in every room. So it's going to be so nice to be able to show up these more visual things for patients to understand. Like you were watching a YouTube, basically.
Yeah. There are 2 very important things that we kind of said that I need anyone listening to understand and know. And I think that's because they are 2 of the most slept on, underutilized things that make your experience completely different. And number 1, we said it, is you have got to frame who you are speaking to or what this question is for and what you're trying to communicate. So even I had 2 talks that they both wanted to know about interoperability and data and all these things. One was at Northwell, for the audience there and at the meeting in Carnegie Hall, and another one was in New Jersey. And it was just subtle enough to where I said, well, look, this one has medical oncologists, but also radiation oncologists, CT surgeons, etc. And this other one is predominantly just oncology related and less surgeon. Like that little difference made a big difference for me because like I wanted to make sure it tracked completely with the audience and the way that it's made up. So my EA always asks, what is the distribution of the kind of patient population? So that's number one. Always frame it. Is it for your son? Is it for a patient? Is it for your spouse? Like just that context. Instead of just asking, what am I doing wrong or how should I proceed? Ask why. And you'll be very surprised when it puts that hat on. And number two, this one's very underutilized as well. When I'm making this PowerPoint, I'll go as far as to go on ChatGPT and make sure that and I know Doug does the same thing and we all do. You do every line, you do the content and stuff like that. But you want to ask the LLM, ask me as many questions to be able to do this like accurately. People always say that, but you really need to experience this. And sometimes I'll say, I want 20 questions back and forth for you to nail it. And that's my minimum. And so when that 20 is done, and I'll say, I do like this, I don't like the tone of that, this could, this doesn't align with how I feel bullish about so-and-so. It's unbelievable how different that script is. So now I'll take that outline or script of 20 slides in ChatGPT where I had a full dialogue. I orient it to the person. It knows who I am already. Now I go to Gamma and populate that outline. And now it's able to like really present this well. Of course, you could go to Gamma and just ask it to do that. But that's the kind of obsessiveness that I think is going to distinguish people one way or the other.
And then with these new systems now that we're beginning to use, whether it's Codex or Claude Work, it's something that they call agentic AI. So they're basically using agents, which are like workers to do specific tasks. And I've been very impressed because when you have to pay for this subscription, and let's say in ChatGPT and Codex, but you put it on ultra mode and you have 5 AI systems working to complete your tasks at the same time. And I've integrated into my process, which I was doing manually, and something that would take me 2 weeks, right? I can do that now in 1 day. But along that, you can integrate so many checks and balances and quality controls that are done by these agents to double check themselves. And then you ask another one to check the other one and so on. So the quality at the end is something that you could not do physically yourself. And I didn't understand what agents meant, because people talk about that. And now even the simple prompts that we all use, now they say you have to use loops. So give them a goal and something that the computer keeps working and checking until it completes the task. It has to be something that is achievable and you can measure, and then move to the next. And so you can go to bed, wake up in the morning and have a lot of stuff done, whether it's a video, which I'm using for, or could be something else, doesn't matter. So I'm really impressed, a little bit obsessed, with all of this. But as doctors, we can use this to do good, to keep people informed. In fact, some patients come to the clinic, they know more than we do sometimes. And they have access to all of these things. They see the labs before I see them on Ethic and so on. So we need to get up to speed on these things. And you cannot say I'm too old for this. No, I mean, these are things we have to learn because we are in the middle of a revolution. And some people, I guess, don't get it. And this is not like the Industrial Revolution that took decades. This is happening like every day, every week, every month. And we, I think, as physicians should be open to understand this. Also, many people, I feel, are scared about AI. I'm not scared. You can see how it's like a baby. They get stuck every 3 steps. So at some point, they will get smarter than us. But right now, it's still, they need a lot of hand-holding and so on. So I feel maybe it's an illusion, but I feel that understanding that makes me less scared what's coming, because I feel I have some control. Maybe it's an illusion, I don't know. But or maybe we will lose it in the future, but maybe not. Maybe there will be a hybrid of human and machine that will make us, in a way, superhuman. But if you're not using that, you're like such a disadvantage compared to others that, rely on their own knowledge. So I feel this is really important for patient care, for research, for education, for everything.
For bettering ourselves, and I start my book with exactly what you said, the we need to talk about cancer. I'm like, look, the main reason this came out, the main reason I did social media education, the main reason I'm passionate about teaching in oncology is because scary things generally become a little less scarier when you understand them. Like, it's with
Right.
understanding that scary things can become a little less scary. To me, not understanding AI is like the most terrible. Like, if you have any sense of fear or uncertainty or restrain about your enthusiasm, you've got to understand it. It's the same with racism or anything else for that matter. I mean, it's like, just educate, learn, explore, and in general, you find a better feeling on the other end, or at least a more prepared one than you have with kind of looking the other way.
Yeah, well, now we are incorporating genomics and in the future, hopefully more proteomics, epigenetics, um, immunology, things that no human brain can comprehend. So this is, again, I know this is not, AI is not I see it as a tool right now, but it's not a tool. I mean, it's going to be bigger than that. We will be the tools if we don't understand that.
I always say when I speak around the country that it's going to happen to us, through us, or with us. And so I appreciate you guys studying this stuff. It's just like when we learned immunology again, or just like when we learned genetics again. And it's the next skill set that you're going to use clinical decision support or screen patients for trial or develop new drugs faster. And I will say this, and I find this somewhat, and this is why I love doing this stuff with people like you, Francisco. Every oncologist I know is fighting burnout. All of them are complaining about not having enough time to do the things that are asked of them. My own physician leadership in my building today, my medical oncology lead was like, we're just being asked to do more and more with less time. And there's a William Penn quote I love about this: time is what we want most, but use worst. And you are telling every listener here that if you spend 2 hours sharpening the saw, watching YouTube videos about how to use Claude Cowork, you will probably find you will save yourself 10 hours a week. If you get really good at it, like the rest of us, you might save 20, 25 hours a week, and think what you could do with that for your patients, for your staff, for your kids, for your bride. And so that's why we're so passionate about this, is we just happen to be a couple years ahead of you guys on these things. But I can tell you as a clinician, it has changed the way that I learn. You talk about talking in the car. I just activate that with Gemini. I say, I'm ready for another conversation. Today, I want you to teach me about, and this week it was cooking with a wok. And we just had a conversation for 35 minutes on my way to work. Rather than listening to someone else's podcast, I'm making my own with Notebook LM and say, all right, I want to hear a podcast today about why people do or don't wash their rice before they cook fried rice. Like, that's just my nerdiness, but I love to study and I love to understand the answers to questions. So that was my ride to work. Now, imagine doing that every time you get in your car to and from work for 5 years. And I don't care if you're studying Vikings or the Odyssey or Christopher Nolan movies or immunogenetics or epigenomics, you're going to learn a lot. And that downtime is now time that we're using better. And so this efficiency is not about rushing. It's about reclaiming your bandwidth for what actually matters. The three of us here are trying to tell you guys, get in the sandbox and start playing with these toys. If Francisco and I can learn, we're probably the age of many of our listeners. I'm 55. You said you're 60-ish. We are not young tech savvy people. I was a zoology major in 1993 at Miami University. I didn't get any of this, guys.
You may not know, Francisco is a musician, so he plays in a band, so he's already an enthusiast. That's how he explained it. It's like, it was a new hobby. He's like, I need to learn new things periodically. And number two, I was telling my son just yesterday about why you wash rice. Like, I just can't believe you just said that. I got goosebumps when you said that, Doug. This was the conversation at dinner yesterday. But sorry, continue, Francisco.
No, I think as we talk about physician burnout, I think it's very important to I like to echo what Doc said about reclaiming your time. Like, I'm trying to be more efficient about this, but there is a danger because I don't want to be more efficient to make more videos. I want to be more efficient to be able to play guitar and be with my wife and do other things and take care of my patients and so on and so forth. So it's a little bit of a learning curve that is very intense if you want to get into this, but I think it's worth it. And then reclaiming some of our time for things we care about is very important, as opposed to just double down on efficiency, because the efficiency is really impressive with these type of things. But I think that the important thing is that anyone can learn these things. I mean, we mentioned here Gemini, Notebook, LM. There is now Flow, Omni. There's so many things to play with, make graphics, with little videos, and so on. And I guess it's not for everyone to make all of this, but at least understanding that AI is not. I see a lot of fear on people talking about AI and AI in medicine, and we want to lose our jobs. I don't believe that. I think right now it's going to be a big shortage of doctors. So if you're a doctor, you're okay. I mean, maybe you're a radiologist, I'm not sure. But still, it's I see it as a tool right now, but I know it's not. It's more than that.
Sanjay, you know my line about this, and this is a James Maniaca quote that I tell Sanjay and everybody all the time. He's a brilliant leader at Google. He's one of their senior vice presidents. I've heard him speak a number of times, and he talks about this is not another general purpose technology like steam or electricity or the internet. This is an inventor of inventions. And it can invent itself. Claude is rewriting Claude every 9 days. And so this is different for the audience. This is not like a fad. It's not going to go away. It's not a bubble that's going to burst. It's a force multiplier. And so when you start to think about the problems that oncologists face every day, the problems that people caring for cancer patients face every day, the problems that hospitals face every day, is that there's not enough time. There are not enough resources. There are not enough people. We're about to have a million nurse shortage. We're about to have 25% of our oncologists are 60 or above.
Right.
They're done, right? They are retiring every day right now, and they're not being replaced. So we know we're going to have this thing where we're in crisis mode while we figure this out. And the only solution I know is to extend each one of us with something that lets us do the things that we do at our very top of license and automate all of the rest of it. Because there just aren't enough hours in the day to spend 4 hours editing. There aren't enough hours in the day to learn to play your guitar right now, because you've got 13 hours per day of clinical and administrative duties waiting for you the moment you roll out of bed. I guess I'm like you. I'm an optimist about it, but I'm also out here, and I'll give a shameless plug for Sanjay. He's really changing the way people approach these things everywhere he speaks. I love being on here with him, and we're buddies, and we tease each other like brothers from another mother. But we're building a web platform right now for Tensor Black, Francisco. I'd love to have some of your content on there. And we are curating just the bare essentials of what a real working oncologist has to read to stay afloat. And it will be videos. This will be on there. This podcast will be on there, but other people's podcasts, other people's content, the newsletter that comes out once a week. It's like, this is what people like Doug and Francisco and Sanjay read this week. And we'll curate it so you don't have to go through all the garbage. Just read these 3 things for 10 minutes each. Have your phone tell you about it on the way to work, and you can keep up.
It's so hard to keep up with all of this. It's in terms of new medications approvals, how to use this. Like last week, we got this new medication, gedatolisib, approved, and now we need to figure out how to do that, what patients, and so on. And I'm a breast oncologist. I cannot imagine a general oncologist knowing how to use that drug, because it's been tested in patients. You know, as an example, it is a drug that targets PI3 kinase, but it was tested both in PI3 kinase mutations and in patients with wild type PIK3CA. So it's just very hard to keep up with all of this. So I was talking initially about educating patients, which is, I mean, when you get to that level of granularity, it's very difficult, because I tried. I'm now kind of going back to more general concepts, because I think that's what people want. But understanding all these things, even for doctors, is very, very difficult if you're not a super specialist. And we will not have many of those in 5 years, 10 years. Every doctor was going to have to know about a lot of things. So you need to understand. I mean, I think it's important to educate the doctors about the importance of understanding all these systems. You don't have to become a YouTuber or be a social media guru, but knowing how to use these basic things like Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini Notebook, things like that, or maybe your platform will do all of that for them. It's something, that we'll have to use, and I don't see any other way around. We cannot escape this, but the productivity aspect is really amazing. If you have a project where you need to write a paper or whatever, prepare a presentation or find out or research, do a deep research, you can leave the computer on in the morning. You have it, and then you can have a summary read out to you by a notebook, LLM or something.
It's incredible, and I'll tell you, my first day at Stanford for this master's in clinical informatics management through the School of Medicine, they basically said, at the end of the day, they're like, you have great teachers, but the biggest thing is everyone you're in the class with, etc. And they're like, but at the end of the day, you will get most what you put into it. Like they're like, it's like you could get by and like get your graduate degree and all this stuff and with minimal effort, but the value is what you put in. And I think that's where we are with AI today. Like it's like it is untapped. It is insurmountable how much you could potentially improve yourself in ways you can't even imagine. But it's just how much you put into it, how much you learn, how much you discover, how much do you play with, how much do you learn from others, much the way of these optional graduate school classes for all of us after going to medical school and everything. And it's, I guess what we're saying here is like, it's all the person. Like, it's like, if you're 80 and you're good with everything, don't touch it. If you want to learn more and better yourself and or somebody out there that believes they want to affect one more person, and that you could be a slightly better version of yourself tomorrow than you were yesterday, play with it, because it's a resource that is just unbelievable. So today we learned about Claude and Whisper without an H or an E. That's like the both of them are ways to be able to really well understand everything they're saying and just transcribe it way better than the little, inherent mic dictation button on your phone. So those are two tools that we talked about. We talked about Zapier and Make, which are these automation tools that you have to make an account and then basically connect a whole bunch of APIs, and then you can set it. That's how you are doing your comment screening, which makes a lot of sense. You put in the logic and it just does it like, as it goes. ChatGPT and Claude are chat boxes, as everyone understands to some degree. That's not really a good term. The in between of that is co-work and work, and that's where you could actually put it to work and say, go do this, go investigate this, start this process, and it will just start doing these things and these assignments. And then the level above that is Claude Code and ChatGPT or OpenAI Codex, and that is where there's actually code being written to be able to talk about exactly what you were saying when it came to actually editing this or being able to reiterate or do a recursive process to be able to now generate exactly, say, the dashboard you're looking for. So for me, what saved a lot of headache was for some of my LLCs. Like I had these Dropbox folders and all this messiness of the write-offs that I had to put in and all this stuff. I finally have something where I can drop it in and it knows exactly where to put it, what category, all the stuff I'm actually learning in my accounting class at Stanford. It's finally being able to do that for me. So in that sense, does it take over some accounting jobs? Sure. And there's going to be this evolution that's going to be hard to keep up with. But until that happens, these are the kind of things you can learn about. And this is why we appreciate you, Francisco, for sharing your journey with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was great.